Welcome back to the Big Fish Little Fish podcast. Here with Teo Debres and me, Miguel Rodas. It's been a long time since we've had a podcast. I think it's been about a month and a half, way too long, and we're gonna definitely start ramping up the content. A lot has changed in the last month and a half, and it feels like every single time we do a podcast, I say that or I allude to that. But yes, a lot has changed. As a matter of fact, we've had a very ginormous incident that I think rocked the boat for the whole country. And, I'll say it straight up. Like, I don't think I ever anticipated having to deal or see something like this in my lifetime. But, we just saw an assassination attempt on one of our presidents. And it was shocking across the country, to say the very least.
First assassination attempt of a president in my lifetime.
Yes. And we lived through 9/11. So we've seen some things in our lifetime that shook the country. And, well, this definitely can shake the country, right? So we were going to talk on that subject as well as talk about a little bit about times it's happened before, right? So, Teo, did you want to add anything about, your thoughts on the subject? Go ahead and take a stab at initial thoughts.
Well, before we even get into the presidential assassination, the one thing I will say is we can talk about the event more and kind of what went on and our thoughts on that. But I had a takeaway, and it actually had very little to do with the direct event and more to do with kind of where I think the country is at as whereas I'm personally at. And I don't know how to really articulate in the best way because it's generally just a thought, but it's just kind of like, man, I feel like after it, in a weird way, I am that much more proud to be an American, and I'm that much more tired of people being anti-American. Like, I'm sorry, I know this sounds weird, but if at this point in 2024 you're hating on America or you hate America and you're American, that's just lame to me. I don't know how else to say it. Like, America is a country that has given all of us so much opportunity. I think we all just had an event that gives everyone a little bit of perspective of things are kind of fragile, and you better love what we have, because what we have isn't guaranteed. And sure, there's things wrong with America, but man, if you're on some anti-American stuff in America right now, I don't understand it, and I don't support it, and I really just think it's a really, for lack of a better word, lame approach to have right now, or perspective to have.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand someone feeling that way. For the most part, I definitely agree with that sentiment. What was one of my takeaways from this whole thing? And I'm glad, you're expressing how you feel from it. You know what I actually felt after it? I felt a little good. I felt surprised by the reaction across the country. Because although there were fringe people who were in some ways like, they expressed that they wanted the assassination to be successful, I actually was in a positive way. I saw a lot of people come together and be like, wow, good he didn't, good he wasn't successful. Good that Trump actually survived the assassination attempt and there wasn't, countrywide chaos. Because a lot of people mentioned that, if you assassinate a presidential nominee that especially is very much beloved by one part of the country, that can create unrest. And I think everyone benefits from the country not being unrest. And actually, I saw a lot of people on the Republican side, people on the Democrat side, that all came out and said, hey, this is terrible and I don't condone violence. We need to be able to trust in the political process. To some degree, there were a lot of statements made. Obama made a statement like that. Biden made a statement like that. RFK Jr., who's also in the race, he made a statement that obviously he didn't want Trump to be assassinated. And I saw a lot of people did come together and just have a sigh of relief that, hey, we didn't have to cross that bridge. Because no matter what side of this aisle on, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, if for some reason the presidential nominee and former president did pass away through an assassination, it would be an unrest, not just because a big part of the country would feel like their candidate stifled their voice, but also because it would draw up so many questions on how something like this can happen. Although there still are questions on how this even happened, right? It was still a big failure on the Secret Service to even let this get this close. But there'd be even bigger questions. Even today, people still think about the JFK assassinations. Was it a conspiracy? Was it an inside job, right?
Yeah, that's part of what I was saying is I hope that everyone kind of walked away and remembered where we're at in the world. Like, we're in a country where we have elections and we have peace and security and, financial ability, like all the things that America provides as an opportunity. That's all based on kind of some agreement between the country. The country has to have a certain level of agreement for it to continue functioning. And when you get that close to an event where if that goes a different way, if you're an inch to the right, that process is interrupted, well, then that agreement and unity between a country really is getting tested. We can't get so divided in America that we get to the point where we would rather see our fellow American be gone than to the point where we say, let's come to an agreement and have some unity here. If you're wishing away half of the other country, half of your country, you're not seeing that we're all Americans. We might disagree on the most fundamental level, but the second you start wishing half of them don't exist, or it'd be better off if they're dead, you now aren't a United States of America. You're a divided nation. And I don't know anything from a sports team to a association to a country where a divided group performs better than a united group. I've just never seen it before. I've never seen a group where you're so at war with yourself that you're winning. You have to be united to a certain extent. You can disagree, but once you start wishing death upon your fellow American, that's a scary place to be. We got lucky with this how it went. No matter if you're left or right, you should be grateful for what happened, the fact that it didn't take out the presidential candidate of the United States.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I was thinking about, and we already kind of touched on it, is that while we're very lucky that he survived this attempt, if he had gotten hit and passed away, Trump would have been the 5th president to have been assassinated.
That's crazy.
And they're less than 50 presidents.
Yeah, it's 10%
That's
hit rate.
That's a 10% hit rate, right?
Wow.
That's terrible. If 10% of your presidents are getting, yopped off, like, whoa, you have to really start doing some introspection. Although that being said, when you say that statistic out loud, 4 out of less than 50, that's still a big chunk of presidents. That's still what, 8%? If you go by those statistics, 8% chance you get assassinated while in office. That's not a very nice statistic.
And you can throw in a few presidents who were attempted.
Yes.
Now adding in Trump, Reagan, and I think there was another one, or Teddy Roosevelt.
There's actually a bunch.
There's a bunch. So all the ones who didn't get actually taken out, it's if you get the job, you better start knowing that the odds are not looking good.
Yeah. Funny that you say that. I actually got a list of all the presidents that had attempted assassinations. We can actually go through that. So these aren't necessarily presidents that were assassinated, but they were assassination attempts. So number 1, Andrew Jackson, January 30th, 1835. Richard Lawrence attempted to shoot Jackson, but both of his pistols misfired. This is in 1835. Abraham Lincoln, before his assassination in 1965, faced an assassination attempt in August 1864 when a shot was fired at him, nearly missed him in the head. Theodore Roosevelt, this one is actually a famous one. John Schrank shot Roosevelt during a campaign speech, and the bullet was slowed by a glass case and a folded speech. And the crazy part is, he still went ahead and did his speech, which is actually very similar to what happened with Trump, right? Trump is like, a half inch away from death, gets down and comes up and it's like, I got to get this moment. The fact that Theodore Roosevelt got shot and was like, hold on. let me at least wrap up this speech, is absolutely bananas. Then there's Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Giuseppe Zoronga in 1933 attempted to assassinate him before he was inaugurated. But instead of him getting hit, the mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak, was actually killed. JFK, in addition to his normal assassination, there was a threat and plots against his presidency. That one is, I don't know about that one. That might not have been super clear. I got a lot of these answers from the internet, so excuse anything if something's not completely correct. Then there's Richard Nixon. Samuel Bick planned to hijack a plane and crash it into the White House to kill Nixon, which is literally like a crazy type of, it's kind of like almost like a prequel to 9/11, right? Except for, 9/11 actually happened. But yeah, no, that was also a crazy attempt. Gerald Ford faced 2 assassination attempts, one in September by Squeaky Fromm and another by Sarah Jane Moore. Jimmy Carter was arrested for Jimmy Carter, a Raymond Lee Harvey was arrested with a starter pistol before a speech by Carter, and he claimed to be part of a 4-man operation to assassinate the president. And then there's Reagan with John Hinckley Jr. This was famous, where John Hinckley Jr. shot Reagan outside of his hotel, and Reagan was seriously injured but survived. And then there's George W. Bush, who apparently Vladimir Avutnian threw a live grenade at Bush that during a speech in Florida, and it just failed to detonate. And then Bill Clinton faced several assassination attempts, including a 1994 incident where Francisco Martin Duran fired shots at the White House, and he was not injured. So these are some of the incidents that presidents in the past have had to face that are, when you start talking about them, it's not something that's talked about every day, but when you think about it, it really highlights the important role that the Secret Service faces when it comes to guarding the president, because, whether you're on the right or on your left, you're a highly public figure that makes huge decisions for the entire world, and obviously you're going to have enemies.
And I think ideologically, you are the person that the people have trusted to do the job. So when you have someone who tries to assassinate a president, you have a person who's trying to say, I am actively going against the will of the American people. And that has to be seen as a threat on the country, a threat on democracy, and a threat to your opinion. Even if you didn't vote for them, it's a threat on your opinion and the process that got you to where you are. We can't live in a country where, there isn't the peaceful transition of power, but also the peaceful continuance of power. And having security for your president is one of the most critical elements. We should be leading the world in that. Well, that's why we have such sophisticated, things like Air Force One and the vehicle he drives around in and all of it. These are supposed to be the best in the world at protecting the president of the United States. So then when you have an incident like what just happened on July 13th, we're planning for the most sophisticated stuff, and then you look at something that's so basic and see that it actually got this close to being successful, and you're saying there are massive flaws throughout that process to get to that point. And that's the scary thing is we need an extremely strong Secret Service who's at the tip of the forefront of protection, and that got through. I think it opens the door to other people in a bad way to say, like, is the U.S. Secret Service not the best in the world? And we are. And they need to be conducting themselves that way. So it's bad from the presidential candidate almost got assassinated. It's bad from someone was comfortable enough to, make a threat on the U.S. democracy process. And it's bad enough to say that we're not having such an elite system in that point in time where it operated how it should have. So holes in the process that for whatever reason happened, and that's just blatantly not acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
I mean, even think about that list. You just list, what is that, 13 presidential assassination attempts?
Yeah.
None of them were as close as what, I guess, Reagan's and Roosevelt's. They actually got a shot on president. But, you know what I mean? Like, the other ones, those are a little further away. But the Secret Service is a highly, highly respected organization. And it rightfully is so. It is the best of the best. And they got to make sure that happens. We can't have another one of those.
Yeah. And then the 4 presidents that were assassinated were Lincoln. He's one of the more obvious ones because it's so famous. James Garfield, William McKinley, and JFK, the other super famous one. You know, and it's, you know what's interesting about this one? This one reminds me of JFK.
JFK-esque.
You know, very JFK-esque, you know, and in some ways, almost playbook exactly like that playbook, right? Because the assassin was assassinated, you know.
That's an interesting point.
You know, nobody really got to hear Lee Harvey Oswald's story in depth before he was killed. I believe he was killed within 1 week of his assassination attempt.
They arrested him and he was killed while in custody.
Yeah, and I think it was like within a week, and
I want to say it was within like 2 or 3 days.
it may have been.
Yeah,
it may
pretty
have
quick.
been. But like, you know, everyone has always had questions about that and what led to that. You know, there's so much uncertainty still left with that, and I think, especially for the people who were alive during that time, they still think about those days, you know. And I can only imagine, like, if Trump had been assassinated, whether you are a Trump supporter or not, you would have had questions, especially the way, like, he didn't even die and everyone has questions.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's wondering, how is it that just the regular Joe Schmo was able to spot this guy and highlight that this dude was armed and was ready to, you know, attack the president, and nobody in the Secret Service, from now it's coming out that they knew about it. Other local authority knew about it, and no one did anything.
My thought is that how do I say this? The investigation for this attempted assassination should be conducted the exact same way as if the assassination was successful. I'm worried that some people are going to say, well, he didn't die, so it doesn't go as deep down the rabbit hole of what happened. No, treat it as if he was assassinated with the same intensity and level of scrutiny, and find out how this happened, who is involved, and how we're going to make sure that never happens again. That's how this investigation should be run. We shouldn't blow this off lightly as an event saying, well, because he didn't die, it's not as big a deal. It's the exact same event whether he was killed or not. It's fortunate he wasn't killed, but treat it as if he was and get to the very bottom of every question you could even have for how this happened and who was involved.
Yeah. Who would you have running that type of investigation?
I mean, to me, if you're having a president or a former presidential candidate being attempted assassinated, you have everyone on it. You have local police, Secret Service, FBI, get the CIA involved, get Congress involved. Everyone should be looking into this with radical transparency to the country.
So declassified.
Absolutely declassified. There should be nothing hidden from the public in terms of how this happened and why.
So investigated exactly the opposite of JFK.
Yes. Let's learn from JFK situation and actually do this the right way so we know what happened, and the people, more importantly, the people know what happened. There shouldn't be questions about what happened on this. There should be an investigation and the results shared with every American so there's transparency as to what actually happened.
No top secret clearance required.
Not for the results. This one's not being kept in a secret file. If you did it or you were involved in it, we are exposing you. You are exposed to the American people, and you will face the ramifications from the American judicial system. That's how this is being conducted. There is no, why are we classifying anything on this?
So the opposite of JFK, 9/11, and Epstein Island.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I think I actually agree with that. Those are great points.
I mean, generally speaking, yeah, for those three things and a lot more, there are certain matters that are of national security. I think that for very particular reasons need to be kept secret. And for most things that impact Americans or happen in America, there should be pretty big transparency as to how it occurred. I don't believe there should be a secret state tracking the information and then deciding what or what they shouldn't be disseminating. I'd say the vast majority of everything should be shared with the American people so they know what's going on, and then maybe a very select component that is something that would impact national security would be kind of kept in a secret format for classified individuals, but that shouldn't be the norm. The norm shouldn't be every investigation is classified. The norm should be there's an open judicial and investigation process.
Yeah. So the opposite of COVID, too.
The people deserve to know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Investigation should be a little more transparent.
absolutely.
Is what you're saying. Yeah.
And more than the investigation needs to be transparent, and more importantly, the results of the investigation need to be very transparent.
Yeah.
I get while you're investigating, there might be a few things you can't share because you're in the middle of the investigation. But once you conclude your investigation, especially on a presidential assassination, every American should know what happened.
Yeah.
It's our right to know how this happened.
Yeah.
We run the country. The country doesn't run us. I
Yeah.
think people forget that.
In theory.
No, in reality, Americans run America. The government doesn't run Americans.
Yeah.
It's a crazy concept for people to think that the government should run your life. The government isn't a thing. We create the government. If you're saying the government should run your life, you're saying the thing that I as an American contribute to should run my life. No, I don't believe that. The government is by the people for the people. You don't just say the government's in charge of my entire life. They tell me what I do and don't know. They don't. That's not how this works. This is America.
Okay. That's good. I like that. Let me see. I feel like I have some more notes. Okay. Do you want to move on from...
Did you have any other thoughts on kind of what happened or what your biggest holes were with the process, or did you want to move on?
I think I have probably the average take of everybody. This was a giant failure, and no one's sure if this is a giant failure because of deep incompetence or, almost like, I'll say it. Like, I think a lot of people feel like this could be an inside job. I don't think that's out of the norm. Like, we have seen so many things come out about things that in all indications appear to be some type of corrupted inside job, self-inflicted wound America's done through political corruption or corruption for different things. I mean, we have there are corrupt entities in the world. This has been going on for the longest time in all of history. America, just like any country, we're not the perfect country. America has corruption. Just like every country that's ever existed has had corruption. I feel like sometimes they want to act like America is perfect. America's never done wrong. America isn't as corrupt as other countries. Like, everything with America is something that is, almost beyond reproach. And that's just not the case by any means. America is as imperfect as any other country. But I think and people talk about this time, what is a differentiator with us than other countries is we have the Constitution, and we have people that are supposed to be enforcing the balances of power to keep tyranny and corruption from overtaking the country to the point where America's completely corrupted and there's no fixing it. That being said, I just think it's one of the two. I don't think, and I think it's very apparent. I think it's either an insane amount of incompetence, which is almost too hard to believe. It's almost too hard to believe. You're telling me all of these highly trained agents, they all fucked up? You know what I mean? We're talking about like 30 to 40. No, it's got to be more than that. You're talking about like maybe, I would assume, and I have no idea how many agents were there, but let's say on the low side, let's say there were 30 agents. All 30 of them noticed this guy and nobody stopped him?
The way I'm describing it is, it's not that it's not possible. It just doesn't seem probable to me.
Yeah.
Could it have happened? Absolutely. But just the basic smell test doesn't pass.
Yeah.
Maybe I higher confidence in the Secret Service than should be given in this situation. But I believe the Secret Service is such an elite organization that it doesn't make sense to me that this would have been able to slip through.
Right.
Something feels off because I truly believe they are such a good organization that this wouldn't have happened in any other, dynamic.
Yeah.
It doesn't add up.
Yeah. And then there's a component of local law enforcement too.
Yeah. Just everyone dropped the ball.
Everyone was dropping the ball. Really? Everyone
dropped the ball at the exact same time when this one person decided to do this very unique approach.
Except for the untrained common person who was pointing them out.
This 20-year-old Lone Ranger, untrained, non-militant person just happened to decide to take this amateur attempt at the president, and then everyone dropped the ball.
Who was a Trump supporter and also was in a BlackRock commercial.
Yeah. Smell test not smelling, if you ask me.
Yeah. Dude, how do you even get on a BlackRock commercial?
I think don't quote me on this. I don't even want to say this because I don't know, but I think that BlackRock just happened to be recording at that school, but I don't know. I don't think he was recruited to be in it. I think it was just a recording at the school he happened to be at, but I don't know.
That's a hell of a coincidence.
Hell of a coincidence. Again, a lot of coincidences here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. Some things just don't feel right when you see them, and maybe because nothing feels right when there's a presidential assassination attempt, but this one seems like there's some really big, that doesn't sound right, going on.
Yeah.
But it's a great segue into the other point, which was, the corruption. I think you summarized it perfectly when you were like, hey, America's not immune from corruption. They're not beyond reproach. It's not like it's not possible here. And I think that people forget that the Constitution and the balance of powers were set up to prevent tyranny because they knew that tyranny happens naturally. Every society has had tyranny and corruption in it. But the point is, the founding fathers had the foresight to say, hey, corruption and tyranny will happen. How can we set up a system that prevents it from getting out of control? And that's why people who don't want to follow the Constitution and how our system is set up in America don't understand that it's set up the way it is for a reason. In theory, it prevents corruption and tyranny from getting out of control. But what it doesn't prevent is corruption and tyranny from being possible. I mean, we were talking about this earlier. There's a long list of corrupt individuals in government right now.
Yeah.
Right now, a very relevant topic is they're having this Bob Menendez guy who is kind of resigning because he was charged with corruption. He was being influenced by a foreign nation.
Yeah.
It makes sense. If you're in a position of power and you are weak enough to be tempted by things, then people will come over and tempt you by things, especially if you're the most powerful country in the world. Politicians are probably inundated with opportunities for corruption. The problem is, we got a lot more that are accepting those opportunities than should be right now. It's not unreasonable to think that corruption is tempting, but the people we vote in because you're supposed to be above the temptation of corruption. And I see a lot of individuals in government right now where they chose the other route. They wanted the money, or they wanted the relationship, or they wanted the whatever they're being tempted with. They're choosing that over their civil duty to the country. And you see a lot of corruption, and it needs to be washed out because we all know it as Americans, but we're not doing enough to stop them from being in the process. The process has gotten so muddied and murky that it's starting to make those processes set up by the Constitution being challenged. I would argue our dynamic for balance of power is literally at risk because we have groups within these organizations that are being tempted by corruption and they're not conducting themselves in the way they should. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny because when we first started this podcast and we ever talked about Congress stock trading, I was like, maybe we should allow them, but there just needs to be a system of more disclosure. The more I see that politicians have become so corrupt. I mean, it's one thing to insider trade, right? I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I understand how somebody could rationalize that because they're like, well, this is for my own benefit. I'm investing in, you could probably even say like I'm investing in American companies, and I think this is honestly the best thing to do. I can see how someone could rationalize it, and obviously it's still illegal, it's still wrong. But like, even like this Sue Miteri woman who you can look it up too, but she was ex-CIA analyst who turned out to be a spy for South Korea, like as recent as like this past week, and now she's being charged with like, I guess like
For South Korea?
South Korea.
That's our ally.
She was spying on us.
Wow.
Like you can look up the article. She was an ex-CIA analyst, and now she's working, or she moved from like ex-CIA to working for a think tank. Literally, like, is allegedly, basically spying on America for some Dolce and Gabbana bags, for some Louis Vuitton, and some other nice things, some gifts, some meals.
That's the thing. They're selling out our country, and it's not even for a lot.
Upscale Lo Fogo de Chow, right? Like it just makes me think, if you're going to be in these special positions of power, there has to be more transparency.
I think there needs to be more transparency. And the problem, you know what the real problem is? It's that good people don't want to be in government or elected officials or in these positions because of how ugly it's gotten there. Like, if you're a good person, you probably don't want to be in the Senate or a president or any of that because you're like, why would I want to deal with that? These people are the worst people in America, and I'm going to go in there and try to, like, fix things while I'm dealing with all these corrupt politicians. So the good people don't even try anymore. And it's just these sleazy people who get in, and then they get tempted, and then they go down the rabbit hole, and then they become corrupt, literally.
Yeah.
They might have been corrupt coming in. They might not have been corrupt coming in, but a lot of them are corrupt coming out.
Yeah. They all become millionaires coming out.
Yeah.
You know what's something that I used to never question before when I was a kid, but the older I get, I'm like starting to question it more. A lot of the politicians, when they finish becoming a congressman, they start getting gigs to just speak for like thousands, sometimes even millions of dollars. Who paying you that much money and why?
Yeah.
Like, is your speech that motivating? I don't know. It begs the question.
Do you think, I do, but do you think that a lot of these politicians are being offered large sums of money for post their position, and then they're being influenced during their position? So it's like, hey, we're not going to pay you now, but you scratch our back because we're this lobbying group or we're this corrupt group, and we're like, hey, we'll influence you, and you make decisions in our best interest, and the second you're done with your time of service, we'll pay you out.
We'll take care of you.
So then it's never on record that we paid you during your term as a elected official, but the second you're out, don't worry, the money's coming.
The money's coming. You can get some speaking gigs for your motivational speaking, or we're gonna give you a nice little board director seat at our company that's gonna have planes that don't work and fall out of the sky and kill people. But don't worry, once you get out of Congress, we'll give you a seat right here.
I would wonder how many politicians' net worth are significantly higher when they're finished with their last day in service than it was when they started their first day. I would say almost every single one of them is going from whatever net worth they started at to 10x or more higher by the time they're done. And it's not because of their salary.
And it's also not being investigated.
It's not being investigated. They're doing it in front of our face.
Yeah.
They literally are corrupt in front of our face. Every American. They don't even care. They don't even care to hide it anymore.
Yeah. And it's both sides.
It's both sides. It's politicians right now. They're like, I'm going to insider trade in your face. I'm going to take assets from foreign countries when I'm in office. And then when I'm out of office, I'll get these crazy expensive speaking gigs or these high executive roles in companies that I'm probably not even qualified to serve for anyway. They are just getting paid out directly in front of our face, and they don't even hide it anymore. They're like, you're not going to do anything about it. I'm a corrupt politician. What are you going to do about it, America?
The giant churn.
The giant churn. On a serious note, real quick, I was thinking about this, and I said, to have a good government, you have to have good people in government. You can have a government running well that has a bad government system if you have good people running it. And you can have a good government system running poorly if you have bad people running it. The best case is a good government system with good people. But even with a good government system like America's set up, if the people we have running it are bad, it's bad for America. You have to have good people in these positions. You can't just... the American system isn't so perfect that you can just slap anyone up in these positions and it's going to work smoothly. If you have enough bad people running our government and being our politicians, America will pay for it.
Honestly, no jokes aside, that is a great point, right? Like, I mean, that can be applied to almost anything, right? You can have a great system for a basketball team, but if you have nothing but selfish players who aren't going to work the system, you're going to lose games. Games that should be winnable. That's happening right now, right? We're losing in a lot of fronts. We're losing economically. We're losing our foreign policy. We're losing with morale in the country. Almost every direction you turn, it feels like we're losing some sense of like what it means to be an America that wins, right? We're moving away from that. I mean, if you even go back to like the founding fathers days, if you had a bunch of cowards trying to run the country back then, like it wouldn't have worked.
It would have flopped.
You have to have good people, courageous people who are unafraid to do the right thing. And that's just not what we have in office right now. You can look at people who are running the country and you can see that like, it doesn't matter if you're, and here's the funny part, everyone can see it. If you're biased, you can see it for the other side clearly. But even for people who don't like politics, they can see it for both sides. Like, I don't look at Republicans and I'm like, these people really, really love America. You know, some of them say they love America. Some of them put on a really nice mask, right? But like, I'm not super convinced. I'm convinced that a lot of them, they do what they say, the words that are the buzzwords that can get people riled up to have confidence in them, but and they do the right thing sometimes, but I'm not always convinced, right? I mean, we grew up in a time where Republicans were leading us to wars that were unnecessary, but now it's to the point where both parties are doing that. Both parties are chopping at the bits to have the millennials and Gen Zs and the ones below them potentially going into wars. There's very little talk about de-escalation now from both parties, and I think that is, politicians, if you want to know what people are worried about, they're worried about not getting involved in more wars. When you have a candidate that talks about de-escalation, that is attractive to younger generations. That's attractive to millennials, and that's attractive to Gen Z. Obviously, there's people on the fringe who, for whatever reason, feel strongly about getting involved in another country's war. I'm not talking about those people. Those people you can't help. The general public doesn't want to go to war, doesn't want to see their brothers and sisters being sent off to fight in a country that is foreign to them, and for people who don't want them there, people who will never be happy no matter whose side they take, and ultimately is a waste of American lives and resources, right? Because not a single nation building scheme we've been a part of for the past, I would even venture to say, over 20 years has worked out, like in a way that I think everyone's happy with. No one was happy with how Iraq and Afghanistan turned out. No one was happy with how Syria turned out. Nobody was happy. No one is really happy about what's going on in Ukraine. No one's happy about how the first Iraq war went. You can even go back. How many people were like, yeah, Vietnam was great? Like, no, we don't want to go to war. That's what our generation really cares about, not going to war. A lot of our generation's like, can we get somebody who doesn't want to go to war and wants to fix the problems here at home? Can we get one guy who's really about that? one guy who's really about investing in the youth, somebody who cares about cutting the deficit, somebody who cares about not sending people, somebody who cares about, you know what? I understand that the military budget needs a big budget, but let's really utilize this in a way that's going to de-escalate tensions across the world and be strategic, right? Maybe we do scale back some military bases. Is it necessary to have over 200 bases all over? Or I think we have like 300 or 400 bases. We have more military bases than there are countries on Earth. You know, that's crazy. Now, if you were to tell me that, like, you know, we need bases all over the United States, totally understand. That's understandable. This is our country. We want to make sure to have the ability to defend it at a moment's notice. But do we need several military bases or many military bases all over all the different continents in the United States or all over the different continents in the world? That's a hard sell. You could convince people in the early 2000s, the 90s, the 80s. It's very hard to convince 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds that it is super necessary to have military force everywhere.
Yeah, I think there's strategic locations you have them, but unless you're trying to be the enforcer of everything in the world, you have your strategic bases and you're not looking for conflict. You know what I mean? You react and kind of do what you have to do to protect our interests, but at the same time, like you said, every American, the one thing we can all agree on is we don't want World War III. If there's an American who wants World War III, they're off their rockers. I don't want it. You don't want it. No one wants World War III. So when we have some pretty tense times in the world, some pretty tense times in America, and everyone's talking about, oh, let's cool the temperature. Let's cool the temperature on everything. Like, we don't need to be this enforcer. Like, I also think that when you go to war, you can be successful or unsuccessful for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons America was so successful in World War II, I truly believe, is because America was behind our presence in making a change for the right. There was, on the war front, Americans who believed in it, and our soldiers were there, and they knew they were going there for a reason. And then there was people in America who said, yeah, we're going to war, and we have to support our troops because they're going for a mission that is critical for the world and for the U.S. If you get into a war where your people aren't behind it, and your soldiers don't believe in it, that's never a good equation. You're not going to have the same result as if you had that same exact scenario, but your people believe in why you're there. If America keeps just putting us into wars and the people don't believe it, we're not even going to be successful at those wars. Even if we have a great military, our men and women serving should be, if they're sent, and they should be sent on very limited reasons, they should be sent for a reason that we all get behind. If we're having conflict and disagreement as to why we're sending our brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers and wife and children, and all these people are getting sent to war, it damn sure better be for a good reason. We can't just always be in war with someone at all times. We're not vetting our wars very well.
Or being so intertwined with country building, state building, being involved in other countries' elections, being involved in other countries' counter insurgencies, right? Like, there's been many instances of America involvement in other countries having civil war. And think about like how outraged we are when we find out there is any type of potential influence, even on something like an election, right? It riles people up. The fact that we've done it to other countries, I mean, it's just like, are we really spending American tax-paying dollars on that? Did we really see a great return on investment on those things? I don't really believe that we have.
America used to be somewhat of an isolationist country. And I'm not saying America should be an isolationist country, but I also just generally don't think we need to be involved in everything going on everywhere in the world. We got enough to take care of in America that we got our hands full. And it's not like we can be ignorant of what's going on in the world, but we don't got to be involved in everything going on in the world. Let's take care of what our problems are, what the American problems are that the Americans care about, and make sure the big rocks, the big threats going on in the world, we're addressing. But the little things and the little dynamics of other countries, those are those countries.
And that's what the politicians should be worried about. This stuff here, not
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
And that's not what they're doing.
No.
It's bizarre.
They're more focused on the other parts of the world than they are in America.
They're way more focused on that. We talk about that all the time on the podcast, but damn, it makes you wonder.
Why?
Who are you fighting for? Who are you really fighting for?
Think about it this way. If our politicians are more focused on global things than American topics, that means they're more influenced by foreign countries than they are by their constituents. Unless their constituents are saying, hey, we really want a war in this country. You, as my elected official, go put us to war with this country. Unless that's happening, they really shouldn't be making those executive decisions for all of us without consulting the American people.
Yeah.
Americans should have some say in are we going to war or not?
Yeah.
I know we elect them, but it's not like, hey, we elected you. Go do whatever you want in the entire world.
Yeah.
Ask your people. Get a pulse check on if Americans really want wars all across the world. I think you'd be surprised, politicians, that not so much.
Yeah, I agree. I think I only had like one more topic, but I think you might have a couple. So is there something you want
going? I mean, there was one other one we talked about. I have a bunch of stuff that's just like, where you want to go, brother?
I was just gonna say this because we've been talking about this, and this is like, it's almost like a pending news. It just hasn't officially dropped yet. And then after that, we can talk about whatever, because that's basically where the end of my thoughts and notes were. Because this is episode 18, but honestly, we're just touching base with whoever's actually watching this stuff. We're just touching base. But like, it's today's Thursday. It's about 8/19, July 18th. Today's July 18th. That's
July
crazy.
18th, yeah.
July 18th, episode 18.
Episode 18th.
Whoa! What a coincidence! And it's 8:20. Nah, that has nothing to do with anything. But it's not even 8:20. It's 8:19. But
Almost 8:20.
almost 8:20. But everyone thinks by Sunday President Biden's gonna step down, which is weird. Like, and here's why it's weird. And I've said this publicly, so I don't mind saying it again. Everyone has recognized that Biden's old. He's old, and he probably hasn't had his wits about him since before the election. You know, that was a big thing in the 2020 election. It's like, is this guy really like at the level of running in terms of like his mental health, his ability to perform the job? Like, is he physically fit? Is he mentally fit? And there were big questions on it. And I think a lot of Americans felt like he wasn't. And then throughout his presidency, there has been a lot of evidence that indicates that he may not be well enough to finish his term, or probably well enough to have even gotten voted in the first place. But nonetheless, he's here. People voted him in. You know, that is the democratic process. That is how we run this country, is through elections. The people voted Biden in. So we are a few months away from the next election. Obviously, the two candidates are Biden and Trump. And Trump very, very obviously won the debate that they had in June. Everyone has said it, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. It's really just a matter of whether you want to give Trump credit for doing well, or if you want to say that Biden is, or Biden just didn't perform. You know, there's a little bit of both. But I think what is becoming like a weird thing to me is that Biden is now, it seems like, being pressured to step away from his role as president, or at least to walk away from going for re-election. And here's the thing. It's like apparent that the Democrats are just like, hey, step down. We know you were elected. We know there's a chance you could be reelected. We don't think you will. A lot of people don't think you will, but there's a chance. And instead of letting the Americans decide whether you will run again, we just want you out. We decide. And that's not really how this is supposed to work. That's not really how this is supposed to work. And it's a little, in my opinion, disheartening, because I'm not a Biden maniac. I'm not somebody who's like he's my candidate, but neither is Trump, right? I'm not really like, these are not the politicians or the people I think should be running the country to begin with. I think we have more qualified people that, because of the political machine, are not able to run, and we've talked about this on many different angles. But I will say it is a little disturbing that these political machines, whether the Democrat one or the Republican one, are just like, we are going to be the ones who decide who actually runs.
I was thinking the same thing, and the way I wanted to do it was I wanted to pose it as a question. And I was like, question for you to think about. If the politicians are asking Biden to step down, and the politicians are the one telling you who the new candidate will be, how is that democracy? When did it become the politicians and the Democratic National Committee, or what is it, Democratic?
I think it's the Democratic National Convention, but I'm not sure. You want to look that up real quick?
But how did it become that the politicians and the DNC are the ones who are telling Americans, here's your new option for president? Like, that's the whole point of primary elections, is to say here's a range of options and you pick the one you want to do. In theory, you're picking who, you voted into the process. But if you get this deep into the process and they're saying, we don't want this guy, you got to come down, we're going to put this person up, the Americans got completely ousted out of the process. They're not involved in the selection of their candidate. I don't know. I think that if anyone's looking at that situation and you're not saying, hey, even if Biden steps down, are we having a runoff election? Are we deciding from a list of candidates? Or are you literally telling me this is my option?
This is the guy.
Because if that's the case, one of the two candidates wasn't even elected to be the one to get elected. That's not democracy. That's not how this works. You have primaries to pick your candidate. And if that candidate isn't going anymore, my suggestion is run a new primary. You don't just say, hey, you're out and you're in. Who's the deciding people there? Who are those people, and why do they get to choose for Americans?
What is it?
Democratic National Convention.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Convention. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, isn't that weird?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. And you know what? If they were going to do this, they should have done it a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? So they could have primaries.
And like you said, I'm not crazy for the guy either. But if, from the outside looking in, if this guy was elected by the people to be the candidate and he wants to run, you don't have a say in that. You don't get to tell him, no.
Yeah.
No, we don't like this. We don't like what the people voted for, and we don't like you anymore, so you're out.
Yeah, it's literally elites bullying the president from rerunning.
They were like, hey, Mr. President, it's the president. It's not even like a non-incumbent person trying to go up against the president.
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, president, you run the primaries.
Yeah.
We don't want you anymore. Forget everyone who voted for you. We decide. Because we are the ones. Like, who are these people?
Yeah.
Honestly, screw them.
Low key, it's hella ungrateful.
It's hella ungrateful.
Hey, man, thank you so much for running the country for the last 4 years. Thank you for being like a punching bag for our party, and for dedicating the last 4 years of your later years you could have spent with your family and campaigning for us in 2019 and 20. I'm gonna need you to step down now. I'm going to need you to step down, and we're probably going to keep investigating your son once you step down. You're going to be our scapegoat so we can keep this train running, and you have to accept that. Why? Because we are the Democratic National Convention. Get out of the White House. We're gonna do what we need to get done.
Well, I think it's saying, I'm reading some articles, and it's saying that it's the Democratic National Committees that are like, they're announcing like a roll call to vote.
Yeah. I knew there was committees and convention. The convention's the overarching thing. The committees are the groups. But regardless of all that, yeah. And it's not just the DNC. It's politicians, too.
Yeah.
And it's celebrities, too. But, like, that's why we have democracy. Because there is a process to getting elected. And if you want a specific candidate, you figure that out in advance. They get elected, and then they run for the general election.
Yeah.
You don't run an election and then after that change your mind and tell the president you're not in. Do you know that's so? What's the word? That takes away so much respect from Biden globally for him to be being bullied by the DNC and politicians.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a foreign country and you're seeing the president of the United States, the person who's supposed to be the most highest position of authority, most respected individual, and all of these people are being like, you don't got it anymore, you need to step down. My guy is still running the country. Like, you're literally publicly saying you ain't got it, but finish out these last 6 months. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's
Who's
not
going to negotiate with you after that?
Yeah. You just took away so much leverage and authority from the person running America.
Yeah. For the next 6 months.
For the next 6 months.
People know this guy is a, one of those, like, what would you like in the wild, like one of those deer that just they don't have much time left because they're injured and their group has abandoned him.
Yeah.
He's just out there.
Can you imagine? Like, I don't know. There's so many things wrong and how so many things are being conducted. And, like, I think it shows that, and it goes back to what we just started at. A divided country never operates as well as a united country. And the country's divided, and you're seeing things like the president of the United States getting, asked to step down. And then on the flip side, the presidential candidate of the United States being attempted assassinated. These are wonky times.
Yeah.
You can't have a country operating the way we're operating right now. We need to get back on track and get someone in charge who's running the country. The country's in a free-for-all right now.
Dude, within 1 week, right? It hasn't even a week yet. It was like, wait. It was almost like, yo, the president didn't get assassinated? Or the presidential nominee didn't get assassinated? Mr. President, you're going to have to quit.
Yeah.
Like, literally within a week. Like, people were talking about it, but once Trump survived that assassination and there's a big momentum swing his direction, like, it was almost like a giant blitzkrieg to get Biden to resign. It'll be interesting if he actually does.
I'm calling it now. I don't think he makes it to the ticket.
You don't think he makes it to the ticket?
I don't think he makes it to the ticket for a myriad of reasons why he wouldn't make it there. But if I was a betting man, Biden's not against Trump in the November 2024 election.
Yeah. I haven't looked at Vegas odds, but I would actually beg to think that those are the odds. Those are the odds. I don't think anyone. I think at this point in time, if he makes it to the ticket, you're betting on the underdog.
And yeah, you are. And I think that I know I kind of started with this, but maybe this is, if you don't have too much more, one of the things I want to end on, which is kind of the reoccurring theme I've had since all this craziness has started in the last week is I love America, and I'm tired of people in America who don't love America and want to see it succeed. And when I was growing up, I honestly felt like being called a patriot was one of the highest honors you could have. If you were a patriot, it means you love your country and you serve your country. You want what's best for your country. And now, do you feel like there are people who have turned the word patriot into a negative connotation?
Yeah.
That's weird. Why would patriot be seen in anything but a positive manner? And I think if Americans could come back to sanity and say we should all be patriots, every American should be a patriot. And that's a good thing. And we don't have it right now. We're divided right now. We need to come back together right now because that's what's important for getting us moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Whether you're on the left or the right, in your mind, you want America to do better. Well, guess what? If you want one quick solution on how to make America better, it's for us all to become patriots, to love America, to actively be involved in what makes America better, and to pay attention on the matters that are important to Americans. And we all have to be involved, but we all have to come together right now and say we're committing to being patriots, and anyone who thinks that's a bad thing needs to really look in the mirror and say, why in the world is my opinion that being an American patriot is a bad thing? Because if that's your belief, you and I disagree, my friend. Being an American patriot is an honor, and we should all strive to be it. It's not a position reserved for the few. It's a position that should be approached for and attempted by the masses. So
Totally agree. I don't have anything else to add. I think that was actually a good place to end it. I know you may have a few other
nope,
things.
I'm good on that, man. I'm good on that. I'm done.
All right, well, let's end it on that. I love that. We love America.
I love America. I genuinely love America.
We love America over here. Listen, we want to see it do better. We want to see it do better. We want to see America united. And you know what? I think there's as weird as it sounds, like I said, I think that failed assassination attempt in the weirdest way did bring Americans together a little more. If nothing else, just to say that's wrong. That's not how things should happen. Like I said, there were some just straight up dumbass people who were happy about it. But I think for the most part, everyone was like, that's not cool. Even if they didn't feel it, but they just had to publicly say it. Everyone was, for the most part, I would say 95% of people were like, that's not cool. That's not the right way to go about this process. So that means people still somewhat believe in the political system of true elections. So peace out from the big fish, little fish. Shout out to Pope.